Beyond the Bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlet Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell. You're here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast. Carol Massar has reappeared, and so has Matt Miller. Welcome to our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Radio, YouTube, and those folks, and Bloomberg Originals. I got it all mixed up here, Carol Massar, and it's a mixed-up day for markets as well.
Yeah, it's a bit mixed up, bouncing around all over the place. You know, we talked about the central bankers. There's certainly talked about, persistent inflation, more higher rates from them to come. Having said that, there's a lot of news on the chip space today, and I continue to see that under pressure, really lagging the overall market averages. It's down about, if you look at the stocks, down about 1%. So that's where we're seeing a fair amount of selling here today, Matt.
You know what I keep doing?
Not as bad as it was a little bit earlier.
All day long, I'm pulling up the S&P, just a GIP of that, and I overlay NVIDIA. And they're not one-to-one correlated, but it's pretty darn close. So I don't know how much of these market moves are driven by incremental Fed hawkishness, because the Fed seemed pretty hawkish last week too. But a lot of it seems like it just still tracking the big tech stocks.
Yeah, and then of course NVIDIA has a narrative that people are totally head over heels over, right? With BlackRock now turning into an AI bull as well, overweighting on AI, calling it a megaforce.
It's actually, I believe, Captain Megaforce, a new member of the
Megaforce.
Avengers is what I'm calling it.
All right, well, NVIDIA, of course, third biggest volume mover in the S&P 500 and the biggest point drag in the S&P 500 by far. Next up is United Health and Home Depot, but still some big cap names in here moving lower, and put it all together, and you get a day, at least for the S&P, that's unchanged. It's going to finish the day roughly down about a point as we wait for these numbers to settle here, but basically right around where it was yesterday at the close. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lower by 72 points, or 0.2%. Meanwhile, the two bright spots on the day, the NASDAQ Composite higher by 0.3%, and the Russell 2000, Carol, higher by 0.5%.
All right, just a quick headline: overstock buying Bed Bath & Beyond brand and other IP. We know Bed Bath & Beyond has been going through some stuff. Having said that, let's go back to the...
That's an understatement.
Going through some things.
Don't get me started on Bed Bath & Beyond.
Complicated.
It's complicated.
It's
Thank
not
you,
as bad
Scarlett.
as Dwayne Reed, right?
All right. Let's get to the S&P 500.
Matthew.
206 names, actually gaining some ground. 295 to the downside. It's almost an even split here. Two unchanged, guys.
You know, another bright spot, and I mention this a lot, but when I see the defensive sectors really selling off, then it seems to me like it's, if not a positive sign, it's not a negative sign. So utilities, consumer staples, healthcare, all among the losers in terms of groups. Energy obviously up as oil rises, and then we get communication services and consumer discretionaries winning.
Hey, Matt, I'm just going to interrupt you right now. We are getting earnings out of Micron Technology. Of course, a big focus on chips here on the day. The fiscal third quarter numbers coming in, the adjusted revenue coming in at $3.75 billion. That's a modest beat. The street was looking for $3.69 billion on average. The operating loss, adjusted operating loss for the quarter, is coming in at $1.43 per share. The street was looking for an adjusted loss of $1.59. So it looks like a beat on both the top and the bottom line in terms of expectations here. The share is higher here in after hours trading by about 4%.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing a pop to the upside. So interesting to see. We know that this company came out earlier in June and specifically talked about half of their sales tied to China at risk as a result of increased Chinese scrutiny. So interesting to see at least some optimism, because I think there was some nervousness, although the bad news was already out there. But this is a stock that's been on a tear, but we've seen a little bit of a pullback as of late, maybe from about late May. So nonetheless, this one up about, 4% here in the aftermarket. Should we get to some of the individual gainers?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, let's get to it. Let's talk a little bit about Carnival, number one gainer in the S&P 500. You can see this one up about Almost 9% here today. You did have the company coming out talking about kind of realigning its corporate structure. The company's 6th largest cruise brand presence now reporting directly to the relatively new CEO at that company. Also, the CFO coming out saying that they may sell some debt to bring down its interest expense. They accumulated a lot of debt. It was cheap, certainly during the pandemic, but nonetheless, you're talking about more than $30 billion worth of debt on their balance sheet. So investors like hearing that. That stock again up 9%. Netflix, we saw that an outperformer and top in the S&P and NASDAQ 100. Oppenheimer coming out raising its price target to $500 from $450. The stock closing at just under $430 a share. Oppenheimer saying it anticipates a higher amount of subscribers following early reports of success in the streaming services page sharing and higher average revenue per membership. And then Sirius, it's been on a tear, up almost 5% today. 5th straight session of gains, longest streak since November of 2022. The company discontinuing the Stitcher podcast app at the end of August, and analysts weighing in over at Benchmark saying the goal is to focus on accelerating audio, ad growth, and a more holistic incorporation of podcasting. It's all about podcasting, guys, just telling you. But anyway, this one's been on a tear the last 5 or 6 days here.
All right, let's take a look at some decliners. General Mills, the cereal and pet food maker, falling the most this year after giving disappointing guidance. Basically, consumers feeling the effects of inflation and the slowing economy. They're buying less, and General Mills is having a harder time passing on price increases. Catalent, the worst performer in the S&P 500. Romaine, you were telling us yesterday about Regeneron's drug application being denied by the FDA because of problems, it turns out, at a Catalent production facility in Indiana. So that stock lower by more than 3%. Regeneron also extending yesterday's 8.7% plunge as well to $700 even. And Entergy is the worst performing utility stock. Utility is the worst performers in the S&P 500 as a group. And this is after a series of storms in Arkansas caused power outages. Entergy is working to restore power to about 1,600 customers in that state.
Let's take a quick look at what's going on in the yield space. We did actually see a little bit earlier in the session a big spike in yields here, and that was on the back of some of the commentary, relatively hawkish commentary coming out of some of those central bankers who are meeting at that ECB retreat in Portugal. But as that conversation went on, the markets found a little bit of comfort here, I guess, in some of the comfort that Jay Powell and the rest of the folks over there seem to have with current market conditions. Ultimately, you're seeing yields down across the curve, about 4 to 5 basis points on the short end, on the longer end, about, 4 to 5 basis points. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see if we hear more about defaults and bankruptcies rising. Torsten Slok from Apollo sent a chart showing that filings have moved up in recent weeks, but we know that there's a real dichotomy here between leveraged loans in terms of defaults and investment grade or high yield credit public debt. So I wonder when we're going to start seeing, if we do at all, a downturn, or if we finally applaud Jay Powell and co. for a soft landing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It does feel like we're kind of getting there. And I've heard different folks come on Bloomberg's, on Bloomberg and talk about kind of a bit of a rolling recession, Scarlet, in terms of what we saw in earnings and then what we saw in the housing market. And like, it's just kind of moving along rather than kind of hitting everything at once. So I think it's kind of interesting.
Powell himself said he does not view recession as the most likely outcome. I just want to go back to Micron for a moment here, because we've had enough time to go through the results and at least look for comments. And the CEO talking about China, saying the recent decision by the administration there on cyberspace is a significant headwind that is impacting our outlook and slowing our recovery. They also talk about the memory industry passing through its trough in revenue, and we expect margins to improve as industry supply-demand balance is gradually restored. That stock, again, up 4.5% in after-hours trade.
There's still a lot of concerns here, I think, about their pricing power, and more importantly, I guess, some of the margins. I mean, when you look at the margin forecasts that they gave here in the market, it kind of makes you wonder here, where is, I guess, the ultimate growth? I mean, even if you are seeing a trough here in that memory cycle here, the question is, does volume pick up? And more importantly, do they have enough pricing power on that volume to actually make meaningful gains on a year-over-year basis?
And what can they really do to differentiate themselves, right? Because at the end of the day, this is a commodities producer. It's not like NVIDIA, where they're enabling AI, even though they say something about enabling AI in the press release. This is just DRAM, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's just memory.
We're talking about PCs. We're talking about, that kind of stuff. And so if you're seeing a little bit of a slowdown in terms of people buying, that, it is a very different play. And this is a reminder that not all chip, companies are the same. I'm looking at some of the other players, Intel, AMD, and we're not seeing the kind of spike that we're seeing in Micron right now. So we'll see how it plays out in tomorrow's trade. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again on tomorrow at 3 p.m. Wall Street time.